Welcome to the fifth and final episode in a Legendarium series about the life and reign of King Richard III of England. In Part 5, The Road to Bosworth, we will talk about the final battle of King Richard III and how Tudor propaganda transformed him into a monster. During Richard's troubled reign, Henry Tudor, then living in France, recruited French and Scottish mercenaries. King Charles VIII also provided Tudor with French troops, reportedly by emptying out his prisons in Paris and arming the inmates, so their feeding and care would now be Henry's problem. With about 2,000 troops in total, Henry Tudor and his fellow exiles sailed from France and landed at Milford Haven on the Welsh coast on August 7, 1485. At the time, Richard III was still trying to secure his dynasty by negotiating his marriage to the daughter of King John II of Portugal. Even if he had been able to complete the negotiations, his prospective bride's intention to enter a convent would have taken marriage off the table. In any case, Richard III had to mobilize the royal army to confront Henry Tudor. On his march to meet King Richard III, Henry Tudor's numbers at least doubled as dissident lords flocked to join him. As he neared Bosworth, Henry Tudor marched with somewhere between 4,000 and 5,000 men. However, the royal army of Richard III numbered at least 10,000, perhaps 15,000. During the opening skirmishes, one of Richard's closest allies, Duke John Howard of Norfolk, died at the hands of Tudor troops. For most of the battle, both Sir William and Sir Thomas Stanley, nominally loyal to Richard III, remained on the sidelines. Richard III had Thomas Stanley's son, Lord Strange, held hostage to coerce his father into fighting for Richard's Yorkist faction. Indeed, the fact that Richard III had to resort to such means shows how loose his control over the English lords had become. With a private army of around 6,000 men, the Stanley brothers could change the outcome of the Battle of Bosworth as they pleased. It is said that the brothers finally gave battle after Richard led a direct charge on Henry Tudor, who had become separated from the main force. The Stanley army attacked Richard's back flank, and soon after, another of Richard's allies, the Earl of Northumberland, deserted him. This doomed Richard's life and dynasty. Though the Yorkist army melted away, Richard kept charging towards Henry Tudor. Even Richard's enemies admitted that he killed several well-known knights, among them Henry's standard-bearer. He even came within a sword length of Henry Tudor himself before enemy troops surrounded him. Since King Richard wore heavy plate armor, it proved hard to kill him. He took numerous wounds and even had his horse killed under him, hence Shakespeare's famous line, "A horse, my kingdom for a horse!" According to some sources, Richard's death finally came at the hands of a Welshman named Rhys ap Thomas. He struck the king's head with a halberd blade with such force that he drove the king's helmet into his skull. As he died, Richard III screamed treason, at least according to legend. If he did so, Richard likely referred to the Stanley brothers, who literally stabbed him in the back. Henry Tudor did not prove gracious in victory. His Tudor troops stripped the clothes from Richard's body and dragged his bare corpse behind a horse through the fields while stabbing him with their halberds. Afterwards, they buried him in the place where he fell. According to legend, Lord Stanley found Richard's crown behind a hawthorn bush at Bosworth Field, then presented it to Henry Tudor. This is likely not true, though Henry may have received Richard's signet ring upon the battlefield. Crown or not, the new king was made Henry VII of England on October 30th, 1485, and married Elizabeth of York the next year. The rival houses of York and Lancaster were finally united, and a new one created, the Tudors. The precise location of Richard's burial place long remained a mystery. Chroniclers only wrote that he had been irreverently buried near the place where he fell in battle. In late 2012, a skeleton exhibiting signs of mortal injury inflicted in battle and of scoliosis was uncovered in a Leicester parking lot. In early 2013, genetic testing confirmed the skeleton to be that of King Richard III. Studies of his bones found that he suffered 4 blows to the head before he died, 1 cut on the lower jaw, and a dagger blow to the cheekbone. In a bit of superb coincidence, the men found Richard's body under a reserved parking space labeled R. Of course, Tudor propaganda justified Henry's seizure of power by portraying Richard III as the embodiment of evil. Some of the great luminaries of Tudor England, like John Roos, who had praised Richard III effusively during his lifetime, Thomas More, and finally William Shakespeare. These men invented a host of legends about the last Plantagenet king. They claimed that Richard's unnatural wickedness was foreshadowed in an unnatural birth and disfigured physical appearance. They penned all sorts of nonsense about how Richard spent 2 years gestating in his mother's womb, that he was born with teeth and hair, and they turned his scoliosis into a debilitating hunchback. Tudor historians even claimed that Richard III had been born feet first, a sign that Satan favored him, or so they thought at the time. Shakespeare even claimed that Richard had poisoned his brother Edward IV, killed King Henry VI, and had been visited by a succession of ghosts before the Battle of Bosworth. More recently, Ricardians have argued for his merits. They note that he was a good husband, a pious Christian, a loyal subject to his brother, an effective ruler of the north, and a king committed to good government. He also possessed many qualities expected of a medieval king, including courage, military prowess, and an interest in chivalry. However, kings were also expected to take the throne by right of succession and by the consent of the great lords. Richard III took power by force and very likely arranged the disappearance of his 2 nephews in order to keep it. Because of this, many members of Richard's own Yorkist faction questioned his right to the throne. Even worse, Richard took the throne in part because of self-interest, and many believed him to be fighting for his benefit rather than the whole kingdom's. Those 2 qualities made his contemporaries see Richard III as a tyrant, not a lawful king. While hardly the monster of Tudor imaginings, at the same time it is hard not to see why few in England saw him as their rightful king. That wraps things up for this episode of The Legendarium. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, press like. If you want to see more, press subscribe. And if you've got anything to say, let me know in the comments section. Thanks again for joining me, and I hope that you have a great rest of the day.